Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Realm of History. Tonight we're here Sunday Night Live for Chapter 10. Uh, Let me know that you're here in the comments and we'll get right into our live agenda today. Let's see. First of all, we'll go key advice, then we'll go key terms, concepts, places. We'll do some AP info for you, and then we'll go into question and answer session. Let's start with key advice as always. Hey, number one, make sure that you're writing things down from this session. That seems to be one of the best ways to study. Also, make sure you read through your outline notes several times through tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, so on and so forth. Use the review sheet to quiz yourself. Make sure that you understand each and every term, concept, place, and key figure. Of course, that is on the review sheet. Now, next piece of advice. Hey, make sure you're praying for the right things, right? We know there's so many things going on in the world. If you're watching the news, so many things going on that I think take precedent over this quiz. So want to make sure that we're praying for the right things, praying for the health and safety of your families, praying for your health and safety. Of course, saying the prayer of gratitude, making sure that we're thanking the good Lord for all the blessings that have been bestowed upon us. And hey, you got to think about those people in the world right now who are worried about so many different things where we're worried about this quiz. You know, we're so fortunate to be in this position. And I just think you got to make sure that you put things into perspective there. Okay, next. I think we got to be here now, right? It's a Monday quiz. So we've got Sunday night getting ourselves ready. But when we come tomorrow, we got to lock in. We got to pop in, be here now. Use your seminar hour, use your morning time. But make sure that you're getting yourself mentally focused and ready for this big picture assessment. I will say this one's probably going to be an increase in the difficulty level than what you've seen in the past. You've got 5 short answers on the content part, and there's going to be a plethora of writing with your first true SAQ AP style on the AP portion. You know that with that question alone, there's going to be 3-paragraph response. So you really need to be zoned in, being here now, and mentally focused on the task at hand. Hey, you wouldn't be in this position without your parents, right? So I want to make sure that you express your gratitude to your parents, even realize. So if you need to pause this video, go say thank you to your parents right now, then hey, please do so. I think that's really more important than anything that we're doing. And finally, hey, we talk about this a lot in class, but you got to rise to the occasion. You got to meet the challenge. I'm hoping that this quiz is a challenge for you. That's really the design of it. And so I want to make sure that you are in school. Listen, don't be a Skipper McGee. Don't think, oh, I got this quiz. I'll just skip, get an extra day of study. That is such a sign of weakness. I don't condone that at all. That's not what the realm is about. Make sure you study, come to school, and give it your best possible effort. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the key terms, the concepts, the figures, starting with one of the first things we learned about in this chapter, the Bedouins and the Bedouin ideals. Remembering that the Bedouins were an Arabic nomadic tribe that had a huge influence on the Islamic culture. Their ideals were courage, loyalty to the family, and warrior skills. And a lot of those ideals have to do with survival in the desert, right? Next is a very simple one. It's the term Allah. Allah is simply the Arabic word for God. It was used by Arabic Christians, Jewish practitioners, and Muslims in the region of Saudi Arabia and around. Next is a key place, that is the city of Mecca. Mecca was a city located in Western Arabia. It was home to the Kaaba. Also, looks like we're having some technical difficulties. I apologize. And it's the most holy city of Islam, and it was indeed the site that Muslims pray toward during their 5 times of prayer per day. Next is the city of Medina, also known as Yathrib. I told you to know both of those terms. It's a town that Muhammad traveled to after being Mecca. Next. The Hijra was Muhammad's move from, of course, the city of Mecca to Medina. If you remember, Muhammad got a lot of pressure from the people of Mecca because They were worried about tourism being taken down. And so one of the key things that you want to make sure that you have an understanding of is that he leaves Mecca in 622, travels to Medina, and it was at Medina that he really gained a lot of power and strength. Next is the Kaaba, which really is the most ancient shrine located in the city of Mecca. It started off as a monotheistic shrine related to Abraham and the Hebrew faith. It then later became a polytheistic shrine in Mecca, and then it was later changed by Muhammad back to a monotheistic shrine associated with Islam. Working our way down, we have the Hajj. This is one of the five pillars of faith. Remember that the Hajj means pilgrimage to Mecca. It's something that's an expectation of all Muslim practitioners to come to Mecca and worship at the Kaaba at least once in their lifetime if they are physically and financially able to do so. Next is a mosque. So we know that Muslim practitioners are expected to pray 5 times per day. A mosque is simply an Islamic house of worship. Quran, one of the major sources of authority for the Muslim faith. It's the Muslim holy book. It is believed to be the written version of the revelations, which were the things that happened when Muhammad would visit the caves outside of Mecca. The belief in the Muslim world is that the angel Gabriel came and spoke to Muhammad on behalf of Allah. Next is the term Sunnah. Sunnah is basically following Muhammad's example. Muslims believe that following the way that Muhammad lived is the best possible way to live your life. Another source of authority is the Sharia, which means Sharia law. It's a body or code of laws that regulates family life, moral conduct, and also community life for Muslim practitioners. Next is a place. It's the House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom is a major center of learning located in Baghdad, Iraq. A lot of scholars came there, mostly dealt with translating famous books and ancient books, but also a lot of medical studies, studies of astronomy, mathematics came out of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Next is the Sunni. Sunni is a branch of Islam, okay? And it believes that the leaders should follow the Sunnah, or what is Muhammad's example. They don't care who the leader is, but as long as the leader follows the Sunnah, they say everything is good. That is not the case, though, for the Shia, also known as the Shiites. This is a branch of Islam that believes leaders should be a bloodline descendant of Muhammad. The only way that they think that a leader should be put in the position of leadership is if they are a bloodline relative of Muhammad. So they believed that Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, should have been the first caliph. Another branch of Islam is called the Sufi. The Sufi is a small branch that focused on living in poverty, and they were devoted to God, very, very much into prayer and meditation, very similar to Christian or Buddhist monks in today's world. Okay, I'm going to get to the questions in a second. I know there were a couple technical difficulties there. I could see that it looked like the internet was kind of wavering for me, but it looks to be going okay now. But let's talk a little bit of AP information. So for the first piece of advice that I want to share with you is that the MCQs, it's going to scroll along the bottom of your screen here, but the MCQs are going to be involved with the following key categories. Number one, Muslim medicine and treatment of disease. So in Spain, during the time that the Muslims controlled most of Spain, the plague struck. We'll be learning more about the plague, but this MCQ is going to talk about how the Muslim medical practices were put in use to help solve the plague. Another MCQ is going to deal with gender roles in the Islamic world, marriage, the treatment of women. Another one will be about scholarly achievements, such as the ones that we talked about at the House of Wisdom and what was talked about in AMSCO. Then finally, the last MCQ will have a picture. It's going to be a drawing that has a relationship to the pilgrimage to Mecca, which we know of as the Hajj. Okay. So those are going to be some of the key things that you're going to really want to have a good understanding of from not only AMSCO, But what we talked about in lecture to give you just that little bit of an advantage on the MCQs. The topic for the SAQ, just as a little goal for you, little reward for you being here tonight, is also scrolling at the bottom of the screen. It's about religion versus state. What I mean by that, it's about the relationship between Muslim religious practices and the role of government and how those things are either intertwined or separate. That's the key idea going to be relevant for the SAQ on tomorrow's quiz paper. Okay, now we can get into the question and answer session. So let me go to the comments, which I see there are quite a few, which is great. And looking good here so far. Thank you for checking in, everybody. I do appreciate that. Okay. All right, so I can see where there was some technical difficulties, but hopefully back in the swing of things here. Let's see. Is there any questions that I can see? Yes, here's a good one. Is there only going to be one SAQ? Yes, on the AP part, there's one SAQ, but remember that with those SAQs, they have three separate questions, right? So those three separate questions are going to eventually going to respond with at least a paragraph each. So you're going to go ahead and write at least 4 sentences for question A, 4 sentences for question B, 4 sentences for question C. And that's kind of how those SAQs go. Don't forget on the content portion, there's definitely going to be 5 short answer questions. So this one is pretty much page 15 to 19, right? And you're going to need to know everything that you read. I gave you some big clues as to what are going to be the topics for the MCQs and the SAQs. Those are the things that I would focus on, but everything that's in that reading is going to be helpful for you, especially on an SAQ, because you know you have to not only provide evidence for your answer, but also analysis. So the more you show what you know from that reading, the better off you're going to be. Who did Ali fight the battle against? This you don't need to know that. I don't know where that's coming from, but that won't be part of the quiz. Yes. Remember, the Islamic faith, the Christian faith, the Hebrew faith, they all worship the same God. So there's a lot of commonalities there. What is the Khadijah? So the Khadijah is a person. It's Muhammad's first wife. Remember, she was a very successful woman. She definitely had, of course, a trading caravan that she worked on and she owned. He began working for her as a trader, and then eventually they became married. And she was much older than he was. She was 40 when Muhammad was 25. Okay, this is a good question, Emerson. So any map that's on the review sheet, like for example, the maps that are on pages 264, 271, those maps kind of show you those trade destinations and locations and where they were trading with. You want to basically know that they traded, of course, across the Mediterranean Sea. One big part of trade for the Muslim world was the Indian Ocean trade. So they traded across the Indian Ocean for important goods with India, like spices. They traded with China along the Silk Roads, right? So those are some of the things that you're going to want to know there. Yeah, there's I'm looking at it right now, and there's only one that's based off of an image. The rest of the MCQs are based off of documents. So the Battle of Tours was basically a major invasion that came from the Muslims out of North Africa. They were trying to invade into, of course, Europe. And there was an army of Christians called the Franks, which did a really good job of stopping that invasion at a city in France called Tours, which essentially changed world history because it didn't allow the Muslims to take over what would have been at that time almost all of Europe. So for every part of the SAQ, for any question on an SAQ, it needs to be at least 4 sentences. And there's 3 questions, so you're going to have 3 paragraphs in total. All you really need to know, Bella, is that the Muslims focused on medical treatments for sicknesses and diseases. You don't really need to know like any very specific things, but you just want to know that this was a focal point for them and their scholars at the House of Wisdom and beyond. Sure, the rightly guided caliphs were the first 4 caliphs. Their names were Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. And with that being said, one of the things that you want to understand is that they were called the rightly guided caliphs because they all personally knew Muhammad and they followed the Sunnah, which was Muhammad's example. Okay, so for this, what you want to know is that, okay, what are the 3 sources? The Quran, the Sunnah, and Sharia law. And then you need to be able to define them, right? The Quran is of course, the Muslim holy book. The Sunnah is basically following Muhammad's example. And then Sharia law is that code of laws that all Muslims are expected to follow. Well, ACE and T are what are suggested, right? T, TEA, or ACE. Yes, you need to use that for the AP SAQs only. The content short answer, you just answer the question. You're only using those strategies for the AP style questions. Yes, you do. Anything that's mentioned in any reading, either from World History Patterns of Interaction or from AMSCO, you will need to know. Correct. Good question. Yeah. So the part that's going to talk about the disease is going to be in the stimulus or the prompt. So it's going to talk about the disease there. You just need to know that the Muslims were very interested in medicine and medical practice. Yes. And then you got to use your mind a little bit. You know, a lot of these AP questions, they're not asking you to regurgitate information. They're asking you to utilize your historical knowledge to come to a conclusion. That's what makes the AP part so hard. Content portion, just like normal, you just answer the question. There's really no limit. It'll, whatever the question says, if it says list 4 things, or if it's the 5 pillars of faith, and obviously you got to list and explain those, it'll tell you in the question what you really have to do. Okay, so here for the SAQ, it's basically about, are government and religious practices the same, right? In the United States, for example, we have a separation of what we call church and state. In most Muslim societies, they were intertwined, right? Like Sharia law was not only religious law, but also government law, for example. So that's really the pathway that you're looking at understanding for that one. Yeah, you definitely need to know the roles of women. It was in both of the readings. It's going to definitely show up in the MCQs. Definitely could still be part of the content questions. Yes. Yes, of course, that would be part of the Muslim Trade Network. Yes, indeed. You will need to know that as well. Yeah, this is really good. Anything that I told you to star in your notes is most likely going to show up as a short answer question, of course, on tomorrow's quiz paper. Yeah. So if I told you to star something and said, hey, it's a high possibility that this will be on there, focus in on that. Yes, indeed. No, no, it's not going to be that easy, Pearson. Sorry, bud. They're totally different questions. So the questions that are in the AMSCO book at the end of the chapter are good for practice. And I do have the key if you ever want to see what the answers are. But you're going to be in really good shape if you practice those. But no, those aren't going to be the same questions. The questions that I use on the AP portion come straight from the AP classroom site, and they're not the ones that you have a chance to take a look at. So they're only for teachers to utilize on these type of assessments. Hopefully not, Isaac. I still see some questions coming in, so I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping maybe you can refresh, join back in. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I apologize. Yes, there is, Jaden. It is going to be a document. It's from a secondary source. So, yeah, you will have something to read. But once again, like that just gives you context for your answer. Really, your answer needs to be formulated from your historical knowledge. Yes, you definitely want to know when we talk about the spread of Islam, which is what section 2 was all about. You definitely want to know what the reasons for success were for sure. Yes, that is part of the quiz format. High possibility. Sure, you want to be able to know how to list and also explain those. Well, okay, so this question is tough for me to answer. Yes, because obviously a lot of what's in AMSCO is also in the content part, but everything that you need to know from the content part comes from world history, patterns of interaction, and of course the notes. The AMSCO is like a supplement to that. So both are helpful for your general knowledge. Yes. A possible short answer, I would say. I can't, there's 5 of them, so I think there were more than those in the notes. But I would say that, yeah, knowing those can't hurt you for sure. Heimler for sure. Yes, the assignments on the AP website, AP Classroom, definitely helpful because it teaches you how to use your historical thinking skills. My MSchool explanation is just a recap of the reading, but Heimler's videos I think are really important. Yes. Well, really what's being traded out of the peninsula are any items that are coming in and going out. Because one thing you have to understand is that with Saudi Arabia being such a central location in between Africa, Europe, and of course Asia, a lot of those items are coming in and then being resent out. So any of the items, silks, spices, gold, silver, those are some items that are big time products being traded in and out. Okay, so there's not much on that chart. The number one thing is who's the leader, who's allowed to be the leader, right? And who they believe in. You got to know that difference. Then you got to know the difference of the fact that they interpret the Quran differently, right? Those are the big things that you want to know on page 271. So anything that's on that chart is what you need to know. What made the Muslim army different? They fought with more disciplined and ranked order. A lot of times back in these time periods, like 500, 600, 700s, when you're fighting against like barbaric peoples, they just kind of showed up and they didn't have many tactics. They weren't very well trained and they just kind of charged at you in mass amounts of people. So what makes the Muslim army different is they're well prepared, they're trained, they have armor, they use military tactics, they use cavalry and foot soldiers. So that's one of the things that you want to know there. It's not the same questions from an AMSCO. Pages are 15 to 19. Sufi's a branch of Islam, of course. The other two branches, there are a lot of branches, but the three major ones we focused on, Sufi's the smallest group. Then there's Sunni, which is the biggest group. And then there's the Shia, which is it's 16%. So it's the second largest group. Yeah. Good evening to you, Master Julius. Okay, I'll stay on and wait for any other questions. It looks like we're hopefully back up and running well. So I don't think it's that the Shia do not recognize them as one of the sources of authority. It's just that they disagree with the Sunni people. Okay, they disagree with the Sunni that all you have to do is follow the Sunnah to be the leader. They just think that it has to be a bloodline relative. But nonetheless, the Sunnah is following Muhammad's example is still one of the major sources of authority for any faction within the religious practice. And so for them, they're saying that's why it should be a bloodline relative, because they want as close as possible to the real Muhammad as they can get, is I guess what you have to take it as. Okay, most important thing, if you had to make me pick one, is that that's where the Kaaba was located, right? Because the Kaaba was the shrine in which all of the Muslim practitioners under Muhammad's following were facing to pray. And so that would be my biggest answer to that. If you ask me for a secondary reason, it would be the fact that, of course, Muhammad was born in the city and it became the first capital of the Muslim world. Well, you need to know that, of course, Mecca, Medina, Baghdad. Then you need to take a look at Damascus, Syria, as it starts to spread outward. Then Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, right? And then all the way over to Cordoba, Spain, which is talked about at the end of section 2 in the reading and also in the printed notes. So there you go. It's about how they associate with the spread of Islam. Okay, Abbasid Caliphate, 750 to 1258 they ruled, right? So that's a really long time. They took power by killing off all of the Umayyad family, right? So they assassinated every member that they could find of the Umayyads. There were a couple that got away and ended up in North Africa, but nonetheless, the Abbasids consolidated power. They created the bureaucracy that we talked about in the notes for section 2. So basically anything that's in those printed off notes about the Abbasid during their time period of control is important. Very cool profile picture right there. The Sufi are basically a very, very strict religious order of Islam. They focus their lives on prayer and meditation toward Allah. And they're not worried about like material things. They're not worried about the Sunni and the Shias fighting. All they want to do is devote themselves to prayer and meditation. They're like monks in the modern world. Well, okay, any other questions coming my way? Well, the biggest hint I will tell you is let me look at them real quick since you guys are here and we're working hard on this. I will tell you that every short answer is mentioned in some way, shape, or form on the review sheet. Okay, there's nothing on the short answer that's not on the review sheet or related to the review sheet. Yeah, they actually follow a progression. They follow a progression of importance. So yeah, they do need to be in order. Faith, prayer, alms, fasting, pilgrimage. Okay. Other than what I said earlier about their names and the fact that they followed the Sunnah, which is Muhammad's example, and the fact that they all knew Muhammad personally in real life, and then I think the other thing that you might want to know is that they all focused on spreading the Islamic world too. They were all focused on Islamic expansion. I think that's another important factor there. Well, not necessarily. The alms were paid to see. That's where in Islam the religious leaders are the government leaders. So it's kind of like a theocracy. Okay, so you could say yes and no, but you could say yes, it is at the same time. What you need to know about the alms is that it's a religious tax that is collected, and the tax goes to help support the poor members of society that are Muslim. That's the idea there. Just like kind of how we like today at church at St. James in Novi, we had a special collection for disaster relief, right, from the hurricane. And so that's an example of every week or once a week you would pay a donation that ended up going to help the poor. Yeah, you should because that's chronological order, and chronological order in history is important. Yeah. So chronologically speaking, you should know that. Yes, yes, in many cases. Remember, like I'm trying to tell you, government and religion were combined in most of these Muslim areas. They still are today, right? So one of the things that you have to understand is that yes, but only because there's not a separation of church and state. Church and state at this time were combined. Well, they are in order on the review sheet. It's Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. So there you have it. Yeah. So most mosques are situated that they face toward Mecca for prayer. Mosques that are in Mecca obviously are there, but you don't have to pray in a mosque. Mosques are Islamic houses of worship. They're situated for that, but you do not have to pray within a mosque. Yeah, so the first four caliphs, they all knew Muhammad. They all were friends with him or relatives, as Ali was a relative, and they followed his example. So that's what you need to know. Yeah, you need to know them. They're in the AMSCO reading. So anything that's in the AMSCO reading, you need to know. Yeah. Yes, you need to know them specifically. Anything that's mentioned in the reading, you definitely must have a good recollection of. For example, Mamluks were slaves for the most part, right? They were bought by Arabic peoples. Eventually, though, some of the Mamluks got really smart, like in Egypt, and they took over because they had a huge number of them. So yeah, you need to know. I don't think maybe I didn't stress this enough, but yeah, like I said, you need to do that reading. You need to know it very well. Hmm. Good questions, everybody. Excellent questions tonight. Is there anything else I can help you with, ladies and gentlemen of the realm? Let me know. I'll stay on for about another minute. I just want to remind you, make sure you say thank you to your parents. Make sure you're praying for the right things. And I think one of the important things as well is make sure you're studying your notes very carefully, especially section 2, which is a print off note. Make sure you're reading those several times through. Well, in the reading, it talks about the Seljuk Turks taking over the holy sites, right? And prior to the Seljuks, okay, the Muslims, the Jewish population, and the Christians had a nice relationship where If you were Christian or Jewish, you could come to the holy sites and worship freely. After the Seljuks took over, they didn't allow Christians and Jewish practitioners in. And that's what really started the Crusades. Yeah, that's what really started the Crusades. Yeah, okay. Hopefully it hasn't been frozen for everybody for a long time. I'm not sure what's going on. It must be my router tonight. I apologize. I'm not a expert on that stuff. Just doing the best I can to help you out. Okay. I think that's about it. Have a wonderful night. I wish you the best tomorrow. If something went wrong and you couldn't ask the questions, you can send them to me in an email. You can send them to the Realm of History on Instagram, and I'll stay up and answer those questions for you. But I really just want to thank you for coming, and hopefully it went well for you. And then we'll see you tomorrow for the quiz paper. Have a great night.